You need to understand intentional leadership. The minute you understand development aligned with intentional leadership and the fact that culture in an organization is what drives its success, then you're probably on to something. Because I saw it over 40 years. And the fact of the matter is that I started at UPS when I was 19, college electrical engineering student, and 3 years later I became a supervisor. And it was the school of hard knocks. It was, sink or swim. But I had great mentors, honestly. I had really fantastic mentors. And mentorship is critical. And mentorship isn't about, let's have a mentoring group no, mentorship is a really personal thing, and it's about development.
That was Noel Massie. He spent 40 years at UPS, eventually overseeing 200,000 employees as VP of Operations. He had worked his way up from college student loading trucks to the executive suite. And along the way, he learned something critical. Leadership isn't sink or swim, it's a science. So today, we're going to focus on what happens the day after the promotion. You've seen it, someone crushing it as an individual contributor, doing great work. The company rewards them by making them somebody's boss. Now, here's the problem with that. Being good at your job and being good at leading people can be two completely different skill sets. And most organizations, they promote you on Friday and expect you to be a brilliant leader on Monday. No training, no roadmap, just good luck out there. In this conversation, Noel is going to break down exact frameworks that turn technical experts into confident, effective leaders, including his 4x5 method for handling conflict without raising your voice, why feedback needs a 4-to-1 ratio to actually work, and the real reason newly promoted supervisors derail in their first year. If you are coaching leaders, if you are a new leader, or if you run a business and wonder, why are your best individual contributors struggling when you promote them? This episode is going to change the way you think about leadership development. My conversation with Noel continues for members of the Star Coach community, where he shares the most important thing that leaders need to remember to be successful in their roles. To get more information about the Star Coach community, which is opening its doors to allow new members in later this month, the hundreds of Star Coach episodes, and to access free resources that are going to help you flourish as a coach, go to starcoachshow.com. That's starcoachshow.com. Now, let's get to it. Noel Massie, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Well, thanks so much for having me today, Meg. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and your listeners today.
Well, thank you. I think we're all in for a treat. And we're going to be talking about intentional leadership, leadership development, the terms and conditions of value-based leadership, like all those things. I hope everybody's like, that sounds juicy, because it is juicy. And we'll get to it in just a second. That's what we do here at the Star Coach Show. We bring you juicy strategies, tools, and resources to help you thrive as a coach, as a leader, as a human being. And I bring incredible guests like Joel on to talk about their specialties. So if you like what we're doing at the Star Coach Show, take a second. If you're watching us on YouTube, good to see you, and click on the subscribe button. Wherever you're listening, take a moment to follow us, because the goodness just keeps coming. This is going to continue to happen. And so you want to subscribe and be a part of it. Now, I'm super excited to tell you why I wanted to have Noel on the show. As you all know, because I do this week after week, a lot of people approach me about being on the show, and I'm super grateful for that. And unfortunately, I have to say no more than I say yes. But when I say yes, I say yes because I'm super excited about somebody. And this gentleman is a representation of that. Noel Massie is a former VP of operations for UPS. Before retiring, he worked his way, well, first of all, he worked his way up through the company, which is another reason, Noel, that I really wanted to have you on, because you are a representation of, you go in, you do your best, you show up, and you work your way up and bring that value and learn lessons along the way. And you're going to share those lessons with us. So I'm super excited about that. So let me go back to before he retired in 2019, he was overseeing, are you ready for this, ladies and gentlemen? 200,000 employees with their 12,000 supervisors. So when people approach me to be on the show, I think about my three buckets: skill building, business building, leader development. And Noel was like, ding, I definitely want him to. He wrote this book. Congrats, you've been promoted. How fun is that? Like, the cover is just so pretty. If you're only listening to us, believe me, the cover is beautiful. But it's an essential guide for helping new leaders and their teams succeed. And let's be honest, Noel, right? Like, you get promoted because you're good at doing something, usually as an individual contributor. You're good technically, you're good at your job, you're good at, so the company wants to reward you for that. I get that.
That's correct.
But that doesn't mean that you're like, ding, now you're a spectacular leader and you know everything you need to know how to lead. So that's why I find what you're bringing to the show so incredibly important for the coaches who are listening, who are coaching these mid-level leaders, or these, these frontline leaders. They need to hear this, but they also need to hear it, Noel, for the coaches that are coaching the leaders of those frontline leaders.
That's
right?
Correct. Yes.
So I think I've emphasized why I wanted to have you on the show. I'm super excited to have you on the show. Noel's entire bio and all of his incredible things, because let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, he's done a lot. That's going to be right below this video or in the show notes, but I want to jump right in.
Yes.
So as I was looking through your book, you start your book saying, what is leadership? You give a basic definition for what leadership is, and then you dive into the rest. So should we start with your definition of what leadership is?
Yes, for sure. It's a simple definition. I would challenge anyone to say it's something other than this. Leadership at its core is the ability to influence a group or an individual in their behaviors, what it is you want them to be or do. As the leader, you have to be able to influence that. And that just goes to the point of, you can't force someone to think the way you want them to think, feel the way you want them to feel. As a leader, you must influence that behavior. And the minute you introduce coercion, you have just left the room of leadership. Coercion is not leadership. And so many leaders fail to understand that coercion that's why it's called coercion. It's corrosive. Okay. It will at some point diminish the team, the results, the leader, because not all leaders are good leaders, and the fact of the matter is that history is littered with, leaders in other nations. Thank God. I think the United States has great leadership foundations from the founders of our country. But point being, it's not all leaders are good leaders, whether in history or in a business today. But leadership is the ability to influence the behavior of an individual or a group of people. That's what leadership is. And then those individuals follow you.
Love that. So without coercion, that I was like, bingo, because what we want to do is we want to invite people into their growth as well, right? But people
That's correct.
Don't really always know how to do that. So we have to be intentional about that.
That's right.
What do you want us all to be thinking about when we think about leadership development? I'm going to kind of let you take that anywhere. I know it's a super wide question.
Yeah, so the book is really about leadership science. It's not rocket science, but there is a science to it. And so what I want the leader or the business owner who's promoting leaders, or the Fortune 500 company who's promoting leaders, to understand this isn't a sink or swim kind of deal. They have a responsibility to make an investment in that individual. You think about it, and I try to shape it, and I use a lot of stories in the book. I try to shape it in a way that talks about how does a team in sports develop individuals. You think about when these players come out of college, they're highly thought of, highly touted. They've been doing this for their whole lives. Yet, when they go to the NFL, they're rookies. Okay, they it's like, oh no, you're a rookie, and in the quarterback position is even more amplified, right? Because it takes time to mature. And it's interesting to me how people get their heads around that scenario. Everyone goes, yeah, sure. As a matter of
I get
fact,
that. Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense.
that makes sense. So even with all the skills he has, Arch Manning at Texas, okay, when he goes to the NFL, he's a rookie. He's not Tom Brady. But the organization expects Tom Brady results, right? The team gets the rookie and they still want to go to the Super Bowl. They still want to win. Well, corporations are the same thing. But here's the difference. That team knows it must invest a ton in the development of that player they just invested in, right? They give him this big bonus. They hired him. Well, so when an organization goes up to Joanne and goes, Joanne, you've been doing a great job. We love what you've been doing. Doug, you've been doing a great job. We love what you're doing. You're reliable. Every time we ask you for something, we can count on you. And Doug drives a forklift, okay? He works for a company that brings in 100 loads a day, like most retailers, or I don't want to get into specific companies. You can
Right,
visualize
right,
that, okay?
right.
And so they go, and so they need a leader because the old leader quit or went on to something else, and they
Or
promoted Doug.
retired or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Doug, you're the leader. So Doug shows up the next day, and this is what happens. He shows up, and the other forklift drivers who he used to work with, incidentally, are
Right.
looking at Doug going, oh, Doug, you're our new boss. Hey, it's great, lava. Right? But then reality bites, right? Someone does something, or someone does, Doug's got to have a discussion. He's got to talk to he's got to talk to Sam about being reliable, or he's got to talk to an employee about work performance, whatever it is. Why would he know how to do that? Why would he know how to do that? I mean, you didn't send him to a workshop. And so derailment for new leaders happens generally in the first year or two. So my book is about preventing that. And it's also about supporting the business or the business owner and saying, hey, you need to understand intentional leadership. The minute you understand development aligned with intentional leadership and the fact that culture in an organization is what drives its success, then you're probably on to something, because I saw it over 40 years. And the fact of the matter is that I started at UPS when I was 19, college electrical engineering student. And 3 years later, I became a supervisor. And it was the school of hard knocks. It was, sink or swim. But I had great mentors, honestly. I had really fantastic mentors. And mentorship is critical. And mentorship isn't about, let's have a mentoring group no, mentorship is a really personal thing. And it's about development. And it's about, it's like like to use the example of Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars fan, right? When
Let's go
Yoda,
Star Wars then.
yeah, when Yoda was all through that series, you had Yoda, and Yoda was the wise person talking to Luke and saying, "Hey, here's the things." He would say all of these cliches and all these quotes to Luke to get him to think. Well, that's what mentors do. They get the mentee to think, right? To think for development purposes. It's for one reason, to develop them, not for criticism, not just for the moment. But so you promote Doug, and he's got these 11 forklift drivers, and there just wasn't content out there for that person, to me. And I've read a lot of books in my life. In every book on leadership that I've read, there's diagrams in them. They're for the person that wants to be the next Steve Jobs, or Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg, or high flying entrepreneurs. And we live in this ultra fast economy, with things like Bitcoin and global and all these things. Let me just be clear. Some things never change. Some things in leadership never change. The importance of trust never changes. Okay, integrity is what it is. Ethics, they don't change today or 100 years ago. If you're ethical, you have honorable conduct towards others. It's important to teach that. It's important for a new leader to understand that the terms and conditions of value-based leadership means you have values you establish with your team on the front end of things. You don't wait for something to happen. It's like, and the irony of that, and a lot of folks ask me, no, where'd you come up with that? I go, you know what? Things happen for a reason. I'm ideating this book and I'm writing this book, and over the 30 years I was a president and I had a 40-year career, I used to sit down and develop executives, CFOs, HR directors, let alone managers at the mid-level and frontline people. And the one thing that I always emphasized with them was their responsibility to develop the team. Talk to me about what you're investing in your people, because I'm investing in you, HR director, right? I'm giving you your 30 minutes of it's on, what do you want to talk about? Okay, you have a responsibility to have a waterfall with that. So the point is that, I was in a situation with a warranty, Meg, on my car. And this company I bought this warranty for, and we see this stuff on TV all the time. They're better today, Car Shield, Endurance, that kind of stuff. Well, I did that when I have a BMW and I bought it, and the warranty went out in the mid 2015s or so, 4 years, and I bought another one. I needed 3 repairs on this car. I was working in Atlanta. I was the vice president of U.S. delivery operations. So I was going to a dealer I didn't buy the vehicle from. Anyway, 3 times I took it there. 3 times the warranty wouldn't be honored, right? So my advisor says, you need to call these folks. And I did. And I'm on the phone with this customer service rep. And he goes, sir, I'm like, why aren't you honoring this warranty agreement? He's like, sir, turn to page 11. I turned to page 11. He goes, look at the bottom. And I look at the bottom. He goes, you see the fine print down there? And I said, really? And then I hung up the phone. Okay. So they called back aggressively to try to get me back, of course. But the point is, that became the moment when I went, you know what? People have terms and conditions. When you hire them, they expect to be developed. When you promote them, they expect to be trained and led, right? People don't sell you their dignity. They don't sell you that. They sell you their time, their sweat, their effort, their attention. What they don't sell you is their self-respect. Okay, you are expected to respect them, listen to them, and not just hear them, really listen. You're expected to treat them with dignity. And in the book, I talk about and give moments where that didn't happen. And I saw examples, and I give examples of it in the book. But I talk about the consequences. This isn't fluffy stuff. A lot of people go, oh, well, no, it's not. It's real. Listen, I worked in one of the most gritty environments there is known in business. I worked with Teamsters for over 40 years. I worked with tractor trailer drivers for over 4. I understand grit. And my book was about in the trenches, when you're in the trenches and you have that employee who goes, I am not doing that. In that moment, what do? Because that is the moment of truth. The rest of the group is looking at you as the leader, and they're seeing if you are successful in that moment. And do you achieve a positive outcome? So in the book, I talk about being able to do that. Because I was a president, understand.
Right.
People would run to, if I said I wanted a cup of coffee, I'd have 35 cups of coffee come to me. Okay. Right. When I was a supervisor, I had to get my own coffee. So that's the long answer to what you started me down. And I hope that gave your listeners some context.
That is. So let's think about, you talked about the forklift driver who gets promoted because he's good at what he does. Yes. And then he's having to lead his friends. He's having to lead the people who he was peers with recently. So instead of just giving him a promotion and sending him into the wild, what are some specific things that you would recommend that leadership does, or the upper leadership does, to help him succeed in his new role?
Well, first and foremost, the first thing the person who's at the top, and this is important, this isn't a cliche on any level. The first thing that the president, general manager, mid-manager needs to do is care about it. Okay, is care about it. Because I'll tell you right now that typically what happens in the morning in that level, in all due respect, is they start thinking about mechanics and strategy, right? And profits and sales and the big giant rocks and the moving thing. They don't think about, Meg's a salesperson for me. And we just hired Meg 3 weeks ago. And she's out on the street meeting with clients. Have we trained her to do that? I mean, I know she worked for another sales company, but we don't know what they were about. Okay. Or Doug,
are our values in, have we taken the time to help Meg understand our value-based leadership?
That's exactly right. So, what I would always, and so I would say first they have to care. Second, they have to act, right? Second, they have to act. And when they meet with the newly promoted leader, the most important thing that happened to me, and I was fortunate because I had great mentors, is I had individuals who were talking to me about value-based things. And so even though when I was promoted to supervisor and I had 100 employees under me with 5 or 6 supervisors now reporting to me, I had leadership lessons that were part of the daily fabric of my life. It wasn't a workshop. It wasn't, hey, we're going to send you to leadership training for 3 weeks, because that stuff's great, but it's not sticky. It's just not.
Right.
Okay, what's sticky is when it's part of your day, when you come in and Meg is a supervisor and I'm the mid manager, and we talk, if the first question I'm asking Meg is, so how many widgets are you going to get out today? How many widgets did you get out yesterday? Okay, or you got this employee, like 6 people that aren't coming to work on time. What are you going to do about that, Meg? Okay, no, if my tone is that, and that's typical. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, Meg's lucky if there's even her boss talking to her in the beginning of the
Right.
day. No, in the
Right.
beginning of the day there should be a commitment to some level of development, even if it's 10 minutes. Even if it's 10 minutes, it matters. It's huge. Just understand, when I would spend 10 minutes with a supervisor
Mm-hmm.
or a manager, and I was a president, right? Okay, for them, that was like someone else spending a whole year with them. Okay,
Right.
See,
Right.
it was like and I'd say, okay, so tell me, Meg, what's the difference? Tell me, is listening, I'd ask this question. Meg, tell me, is listening a skill or a value?
And you're actually asking me. I think
Yeah.
it's a value.
So at the end of the day, do you listen to people you don't value? And the answer is no.
Right.
If you don't value someone, you don't listen to them. But the other thing is, it's also a skill. There are key behaviors you
Right.
should display. So the answer is both. Well,
Mm-hmm.
and so I get the person, I want the person to ponder that moment, right? So as a leader, if you have a Meg under you and you both have read, congrats, you've been promoted. Congruence is important. Now you have a common place to have a discussion. You have, and I would do this regularly. I'd buy a book. One of my favorite writers was David Cottrell. And David Cottrell wrote this book called Monday Morning Choices. I bought like 600 copies of this thing, right? And of course, his office called me immediately. Hey, great, you bought all my books. I love you, right? But anyway, I handed out 600 copies of this thing in Southern California to my management team. I had about 1,400 people that were leading the 25,000 we had there at that time. But we read that book on a weekly basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Five, 2 or 3 pages, 2 or 3 pages. And then I would pick a manager and I'd say, okay, and it'd be on a conference call. We didn't have Zoom, and in the mid 2015, we'd have a conference call or something. And
Right.
a manager would get a note from their director. You're going to lead the discussion today on pages 2 and 3 and your thoughts on it. And then there'd be a kind of people would chime in. But the point is that I created intentionally an environment of development, an environment of learning, right? There was congruence in the group.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this, and this matters because there's a story in that book that I loved, and it's called Poor Gary. Poor Gary. And it's a story about 2 individuals, Colin and Gary. And that's how the book opens in the first couple of pages. You know, down the hall is Gary. Down the hall is Gary. And things aren't going right. And Gary's always complaining. He thinks other people get the best calls. He thinks and so Gary, every month, Gary is not being successful. And he's thinking he's going to change the following month. No. And then on the other side of the hall is Colin. And Colin, when things don't go well, he breaks them down. He analyzes them. He reviews them with his peers. He gets feedback. All these other things Colin's doing. Okay, and so Colin continues to have a positive outlook, which produces positive results, which produces positive things, because positivity produces. And so then the book, that one first part, and I'm really summarizing this a lot. It says, so at the end of the month, the results for Colin is this, and at the end of the month, the results for Gary is this. And so this is poor Gary. And then the story, he's poor Gary. Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
let me contextualize this. So when I was talking to a manager, and the manager would might be going down this road, I go, oh, we're having a poor Gary moment today. And they would go, no, not being poor Gary. It was congruence. It was
Mm-hmm.
congruence. We were speaking a common
The
language.
same language.
That's
Yeah.
right. My book is intended to create that, right? When you talk about fairness, what that even looks like for an employee is not your opinion, it's their opinion. What is fair,
Mm-hmm.
all right? It's one of the toughest things to navigate for a frontline team. The other thing is ethics and integrity. And I start with those.
Mm-hmm.
Integrity is the most important thing a business owner or a leader needs to develop within their team. It is not a simple process. If it was, you just have a sign on the door that said, everyone have integrity today, and it would happen. The fact of the
Okay.
matter is, 40% of employees in a study that was done by Yale actually recently, last decade, showed that 40% of employees in all workplaces feel that at some point they're being asked to behave unethically to do their job. 40%. Okay.
That's intense.
That's crazy. I worked in an organization where no, okay, ethics was foundational, right?
Mm-hmm.
Honorable ethics, as it's spoken, at least in my life, was honorable conduct towards others. Kind of easy to see what dishonorable conduct looks like. The minute you manipulate or take advantage of people, you are being unethical. Integrity involves the individual's behavior. Ethics means you've included other people in your party. And people that are unethical are always looking for people to join their party, and it's not copybook, right? You've had lawsuits recently with some large organizations that had to pay billions of dollars to the federal government with fines because they had unethical behavior in their organization. And I'm not going to get into which of those are, but there's some
Right.
banks.
Right.
There's some banks. Okay, all I got to do is say banks, and people go, oh, they can think of one or two.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
okay. One of the biggest ones I talk about in the book is the opioid crisis and how it was legal, right? But just because something's legal doesn't make it
Legal
ethical.
doesn't make it ethical.
I want the leaders who engage in the book to get those principles. Go ahead, Meg.
So you were talking about value-based leadership and integrity and ethics and how it all comes to that. And one of the key things you also point out is how important it is to provide feedback. And I as you were talking, I thought, let's tie feedback into that because we can give feedback lots of different ways.
Yes.
And they're not all the best ways to give feedback. So as a leader and as people are listening for either people they're coaching who are leading others, or feedback is a key part of that, receiving feedback and delivering feedback. What would you like us to be aware of regarding that?
The feedback model. First of all, people struggle with providing feedback. Okay. Let me tell you who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. Let me tell you who never struggles with providing feedback. Professional sports coaches, high school hit coaches. Okay. They know if they don't give that offensive guard feedback, that person's not getting better. They just know it. Right. And that guard or that center or that wide receiver know if they don't get feedback, they're not getting better. Right. There's a congruence on feedback. Now, it might be rough feedback. I wouldn't recommend run your business the way that those coaches run those teams, because some of
Right.
that language can be kind of rich. But the point is that feedback is something that is a part of life. You learn it as a child. How many parents don't give their kids feedback? I mean, come on. They give them too much
Well, if they
feedback.
don't,
Ask
yeah,
ask the
yeah.
kids. Ask the kids if they get any feedback from the parents. They'll be like, oh my gosh, way too much. Right? Okay. So you go through your whole life in a feedback kind of lifestyle. You really do. But so then why is it so difficult when you become the leader of a group of people, whether it's a city council or a board or a PTA or the workplace? Why is that hard? Why is that difficult? Right? Well, it's because most people don't know how to do it. Simply stated, the proper format to provide effective, because the key word here is effective feedback
Mhm.
is number one, to understand that listening is a skill and a value because it kind of starts there, right? And so when you're providing feedback to a person, the forms of feedback you need to understand is that there's two forms. There's formative feedback, meaning forming, and then there's motivational feedback, meaning positive reinforcement. And the right delivery of feedback is for positive inputs to one constructive, meaning 4 motivational inputs to one formative feedback. So if I'm saying, Meg, man, you look great today. I love the way your office is situated. I can see you spend a lot of time, getting this thing organized. I really appreciate that. Right? That matters to Meg a lot. I'm acknowledging the things she's done well. It's not a joke. I'm not being manipulative. I gave you an assignment. An assignment was, can you go clean up the office or straighten up the office or whatever? And I gave you 4 positive inputs. And I say, so did you think about, now on the formative side, I say, now I want you to think about this fixture you have in front of the door, because it's at like 6 feet. If someone's taller than 6 feet, they might bump their head, Meg. So I'd like you to take a look at that. That's formative feedback, right? I'm giving you feedback to correct something. 4-to-1 feedback is not a joke. It works. Okay. I can tell you right now that people generally learn feedback when something's bad. You're not coming to work on time. And if you don't come to work on time, you're going to get disciplined. Blah, 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 blah. Well, in the book, I talk about how to do that. And I have a method called the 4x5 method. The 4x5 method is a feedback method. It's a structure. It gives the leader and the individual a place to start, right? It's like if I take you out and teach you how to drive a car defensively. And I say, man, we're going to drive through 20 oil slicks. Because I'm going to teach you how to keep this car straight, driving to 20 oil slicks, right? Okay, well, let me tell you what happens. When you see a real one in life, okay, it's not new. Your reaction to it will be much calmer. You'll be able to navigate that much better. So the 4x5 method tells the leader, people see things from 4 perspectives. To influence their behavior, you need to speak to them in a way that does that. And there's 4 ways people are going to look at. There's 4 approaches you can use. The first perspective is the employee's perspective. People always support their own perspective the most. The second perspective is the supervisor's perspective. Okay, is actually the one that's the least important in a conflict situation. The third perspective is the company's perspective. And the 4th perspective is the customer perspective. So in the book, I go, there's 4 perspectives you can come at a problem with, the 4x5 method. And the 5 denotes intensity, because what should never denote intensity is amplification of voice. Meg's not coming to work on time. You come to work, and I don't go, Meg, you're late again, blah, 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 right? Because that's typically what happens.
Right.
Frustration has no place in the moment. There's times in leadership where you have to understand your emotions are inappropriate. You don't get to say, well, I'm only human. Nope, you don't get to be human. You get to be professional. You don't get to be human. You get to be professional. And the 4x5 method says there's 5 intensity levels to handle a problem. And the first and the lowest intensity, I won't go through them all, is Meg, I would like to talk to you. You can understand that if I say that, it's not high level. It's friendly. It's comfortable. But then if I go, Meg, when you get a moment, I need to talk to you. You can feel I shifted the gear.
Yeah.
Okay, and if it's about the customer on Market Street, and I go, Meg, hey, Meg, you got a moment? I'd like to talk to you about the customer at 100 Market Street. You're like, sure, no, right? It's low. You can feel it. But if I go, Meg, I need to talk to you about the customer on Market Street. You already can feel how the importance just went up.
Yes,
I want
sure
the new
did.
leader to understand that words matter. Words are how people hear things, not by volume, right? And if I go, Meg, and I've already spoken to you, I went through, I would like on Monday. On Wednesday, I will say, Meg, I need to talk to you about this customer Market Street. You felt that, right? And then if I go on Friday, it just blew up. Meg, we must talk about the customer on Market Street. You can feel I shifted. Right. Okay. And so the point is that by taking intensities with viewpoints, that's how you influence Meg. And so an example of that for your YouTube listeners is Meg is late to work, and I have to talk to Meg about, she's been late to work like 5 or 6 times in the last couple of weeks or something. And I have to talk.
Meg's a problem child. Yes.
That's right. So when she comes to work, hey, Meg, I'd like to talk to you about your reliability. Is probably not the right intensity. It's very low level, right? I mean, if it's been 5 or 6 times, should have been used way ago, right? So now we're at Hey, Meg, I want to talk to you about your attendance. Now I'm at intensity 3, right? It's not,
Mm-hmm.
now it's up. I'm not at
Mm-hmm.
5. It's not we must, but you can
Right.
feel it because in the book I talk about I'd like, I need, I want, we must. That's where that goes. And I'd say, so, Meg, I'd like you to come in my office a minute because I want to talk to you about reliability for a moment. And Meg comes in, and so let me ask you a question, Meg. You ever used Uber or Lyft? And most people have, right? They have. And Meg, have you ever used?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to kind of role play this for your
Okay.
people listening.
Okay.
So I'd say, Meg, have you ever used Uber or Lyft? Have you ever used it?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
So let me ask this question, and we'll get to what I want to talk about in a minute. But let me ask this question. So what if they were 30 minutes late a couple times in a row, and they were Uber, and you were trying to get to a restaurant or a game on time? What would you do if they continued to be late? Uber. What would you do?
I'd quit using them. I'd probably even give them a bad review.
So you probably would pick another,
A different company.
probably
Yeah.
Lyft or something, right?
Yeah.
So Meg, is reliability? So then that matters to you. Then reliability is important to you. Is that right?
It sure
Okay.
is.
Then in the last few weeks, I wouldn't know it.
I don't get what you mean. What do you mean?
You've been late 5 or 6 times. You get what I mean, Meg, right? So you would get rid of Uber, but you think our organization didn't have the same perspective when it comes to you. Oh, that works. So I
Yeah.
need your word, Meg, that you're going to fix the problem. Not a promise, not a commitment. Look me in the eye, Meg, and give me your word. You will correct your attendance.
I will correct my attendance.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. You're doing a great job in all other aspects, Meg. You're a really valuable member of the team. And I really don't want to see this continue to be a problem. So you gave me your word. I'm going to keep you to your word. Go back to work. That's what I teach in the book. Metaphors matter. When you use a
Mm-hmm.
metaphor, you disarm the circumstance. You take the employee out of the issue. And so in the book, I talk about the use of metaphors along with the 4x5 method to handle conflict. And so the new supervisor, think about what we just went through. They have never seen that.
Mm-mm.
They're not going to learn that. It would take them 30 years to learn that if they ever did. Right. So at least it gives them a frame. It's not an end all
Right.
be all. It's not an end all be all. It's not the Einstein of leadership approach. It's an approach. It's like getting in that car and I'm teaching you how to go through an oil slick. I'm giving you now you have to practice it on your own. But at least I'm giving you the structure. And so at
Love
least
that.
that starts your journey where you're not a calamity, right? And I had those calamitous moments when I was newly promoted back in the day. And so that's the intent. So that was an example of a skill development component because at the end of every chapter are exercises. We're not just talking. It's like, here's the structure, here's the talent. Now, go get family members, use metaphors on them, start
Mm-hmm.
practicing,
Practice, practice.
use the real life ones in your life. Don't make stuff up,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because they're effective. Because again, to finalize this discussion, feedback, 4 positive inputs to 1 corrective. That's effectiveness, whether it's safety training, training an employee to drive a forklift, 4-to-1 skill development. And if listeners can look that up, actually, that's a very well-known
Well, yeah,
feedback
because
model.
we're all wired for negative bias, so that we
That's
need
right.
more positive to be able
And
to,
today, and
yeah.
most people don't get on social media when they get, I'm not one of those to do that. But the problem today with social media is people can fight from computer laptops, right? So they get on, they start debating, and so our tone in our society has really shifted to kind
Yeah.
of a negative, So
Heavy.
it's
Yeah.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for people to take that behavior with them into the workplace. Okay, and
That's
and
really
so
good insight. Yeah.
yeah, and this helps people to not do that.
Love it. Well, no, we are already towards the end of our time together. So, as we're wrapping up our time, if people were to just take one message away from this interview, one thing that they, one thing that's the most sticky, what do you want to be sure that they think about?
Invest in your development personally. You own it, not your company. The business owner should be investing in their team. They own it. It's their company. If you make no investment, why would you expect a return? I think it's an absurd concept, but people do. They go, well, I'm not going to invest in the development of my team, but we should win every ball game. Okay, good luck with that. Okay,
Yeah.
you're a head NFL coach. Say we're not having practice in our club. We're never practicing. You came out of college. You know how to play. Okay, here's the playbook. Okay, read it. And on Sundays, we're just going to use it and play the game. Okay, you'll be fired so fast it wouldn't be funny. And,
Right.
and why people get away with that in business is because it's culturally normal. It's not because anyone thinks they're doing something wrong. It's just the way the business lives. But the very smart leaders, and I had a few work under me, and I worked for some, get that you can't think of it that way. You have to invest, right? If you want to withdraw, you have to invest, just like going to a bank. Go to a bank and say,
Right.
hey, I'd like to make a withdrawal today. And they go, sure,
Where you've never
Meg.
made a deposit. Yeah.
Right. They go, yeah. Oh, is this a bank robbery? Right? Well, then you need to leave. We're not giving you. Okay. You might want to go get a loan, but we're not giving you any money. The point is that that's a very simple concept. And the founder of the organization I worked for was an amazing person, James E. Casey. And I want to say his name and give honor to it. He founded UPS in 1907, and he really founded it for people that were working class people. He said, I'm going to take these working class people and I'm going to let them own part of this company, and I'm going to treat them with dignity and respect. They'll be held accountable, but they will run through walls for me. And that company that he started in 1907 in Seattle, Washington, of 6 bicycle messengers,
Oh,
by
wow.
by 1997 was the largest privately, not on the stock market owned supply chain company in the world, in over 200 countries, right? With 400,000 people. Well, why? Why did that happen that way? It's because his value-based approach to leadership worked. He created out of a 19-year-old person, Noel Massie, who grew up in East Oakland, California, an individual who became vice president of U.S. delivery operations because I was coached, I was developed. There was an investment made, and it was constant. And I had mentors, and it mattered, and they kept me out of trouble. They stopped me from getting in my own way. And that's why I wrote the book. It's a legacy to some degree, and it has things in it. Doing nothing is exactly that. It means you're doing nothing to develop and invest in your team. And if you're doing nothing, why would you get something? I want them to really hear that.
Love that. There will be links on how to access this beautiful book, as well as other ways to connect with Noel in the show notes, as well as below this video. Noel, just like if you were to throw out one best way for people to connect with you, what would you say that is?
Well, the best way is, of course, I'm on LinkedIn for sure. Easy to find. And if you ask for an invitation, I'll accept it. That's been happening a lot. And on my
I bet it
website,
has.
there's a contact information there. But my website is noelmassie.com is my website. And any of your listeners that want a conversation about more here can reach us that way. And there's a contact form you can fill out that doesn't require a purchase of any sort to do that. But when they go on the website, they can see that when they hit order book, and it's going to take them to this whole screen of stuff that they can look at. The book is for sale at Barnes and Noble, Simon and Schuster's the publisher, and Amazon is also a distributor.
Okay, beautiful. So, thanks again for joining us. And thanks all of you for being here for another week of the Star Coach Show. I believe strongly in everything that Noel was talking about. And what the common thread to that was that we're all here on this earth together. We're trying to do the best we can do. Let's support one another in that. Let's look for what we have in common rather than always focusing on what makes us different or separate from one another. Even if we think differently, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not connected. So let's do the heavy lifting together. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe wherever you're listening. And thanks again to the wonderful Noel Massie for joining me this week.
Thanks, Meg, for having me.